Hi, I'm Roland and welcome back to Practical Plastic. So today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Now, you see this big thick box sitting on the table here. So, going to go back a little bit and go on a little historical tangent. So, I mentioned in a couple of my build videos that my brother and my friends and I, we used to do board games, war games, did some role-playing games. This is the reincarnation from Steve Jackson Games of the fantasy trip, which was grew into their Steve Jackson Games role-playing game. So this is what we played 40 plus years ago. We moved on from that to another game called RuneQuest. My original RuneQuest rulebook, also probably about 40 years old now, which was also a lot of fun. However, the thing with these games, looking at it now as an adult, all this role-playing stuff, time, and frankly, it gets to be it gets to be a little bit of a pain after a while. If you just want to play, can go ahead and just do the combat, which in both these games is a tremendous amount of fun. Now, I am still of the opinion that RuneQuest has the best tactical system for swords, shields. You can throw magic in with both these game systems, but to me, you don't need it. Just running around with swords and axes and shields and stuff and fighting each other is a tremendous amount of fun. The fantasy trip grew out of this game, Melee, which is their version of just the combat system, no magic, no role playing, none of that extra stuff. So, RuneQuest used a very simple movement system, which was just a linear measurement. So all you needed was a ruler, which was pretty cool because you didn't need one of these hex maps to move around. Melee relies on a hex map system. These are one inch hexes because they are set up for using miniatures for play, which is really cool. But point of all this, a few weeks ago, I got together with my brother and our friends, and we played Melee again for the first time in, again, this 40 plus years. And it was so much fun. But while we were playing, I was looking at the map. Now, my brother has a nice cloth battle map that has some color to it, but I was still looking at it and thinking, this needs a little terrain. It needs some third dimension, especially since we have the miniatures running around on the map. So that will be the topic of today's episode, which is sort of elementary diorama skills in building three-dimensional forms for your additional gaming pleasure. Now, while we were playing the game, this kind of hit me as, I can do this. I have the stock styrene laying around, and I was already assembling it in my head, and I realized this could be a pretty simple construction. So I went ahead and I built one, and just a couple of stairs and a raised platform, and I thought that was so neat. I built another, and then I built another. And why have three when you can have four? And then I built, which was more involved than I thought, this little tower here with spiral stairs, which took a lot more effort than I thought, but very neat and still actually very simple. So what I'm going to do on today's episode is show you how you can build one of these without having to go out and pay for them, because these things, if you buy them, they can get a little pricey. But with a little time and effort, not only can you have your own, but you get the enjoyment of having built it. And if you are interested in getting into doing diorama work, this, at least in my opinion, this is a great introduction to getting involved in that and building forms as a lead in to doing whole, environments, let's call them, for a diorama. I'm going a little off topic from my usual building cars and trucks, and I do have all the parts for the London bus that I'm working on scattered here, but in the middle of that I started tinkering around with this. Unfortunately, I didn't film any of it as I was doing it, but the further I got into it, I realized, dopey, should have been filming it. So for the model building people out there, this may not be, your exact cup of tea, but I still think if you're building cars, trucks, certainly if you're building military vehicles, at some point you may be interested in doing a diorama or at least some type of display base. When I built the Riffield Panther, I did a display base for that. Also for the Meng Mark IV British heavy tank from World War I did a display base for that. Those were very simple. I did for the MR2, Toyota MR2, I did an episode showing how to build a little display case with a little, diorama type setting in there. Again, very simple. But this would be a good segue into doing those things if your interest is going in that direction. So, at this point, I'll just say thank you for watching, and please do like, subscribe, hit the alert button and all that good YouTube stuff. So, I'm gonna flip the camera around and I'll show you how we can do one of these. Alrighty. Okay, so now with the camera around, it's a little bit easier to take a look at things. So just to give you a closer look at the little base I built, that's a look at that, and the crazy spiral stair tower of terror. So, how do we end up with this? Where do we start? Now, because In the Labyrinth uses hexes, they give you in that giant Master Edition box there, they give you these die-cut hex pieces. So right away, have an outline to measure the hexes without having to sit there with a ruler and measure out. Now, keep in mind, I'm mentioning, Melee, In the Labyrinth, RuneQuest, whatever, but any tabletop miniature style game, all this applies. Whether it's a game that uses a ruler-based movement, a hex-based movement, who cares? It doesn't matter. You can use these. I went as the final step, which I'll show. I drew in the hex grid, but if you're playing a game that does not need a hex grid, don't draw the hex grid in. And then you don't have to cut along a hex grid. You can just do a free-form cut. Anyway, since I am doing that, I will show you how I did that, and then it'll be obvious along the way how you can change it up to do your own things. So what I did, I took out these pieces, and as I said, these were die cut, so it's just a matter of pressing them out, because I realized I needed some steps going up, so I needed a single hex shape, also where you first come up, and then the platform this is called if you're not familiar, this is called a mega hex because it's hexes around a central. So I started laying out what I would need. So there's the platform and the step coming up. Do it the same way so it's even. And then I realized I needed space for the steps. For the height, I just looked at a miniature and I figured, well, platform, let's go for about mid-chest height to a 25 millimeter figure, and did it from there. But whatever height you want to do, again, it's a matter of measuring. So for my steps, I figured a third of a step a third of that height for each step would be workable. So I just divided that height by 3. Now, to make my life a little bit easier, because I was already thinking of what material I would use, you notice I'm using this stock styrene with a tile pattern on it. So I went and measured, and I thought, the easiest thing would be to go right along one of the recessed lines for the tile, because then I know my cuts will always be true. And there we go. So I decided on a 5 tile height, and that was that. So I decided 3 steps, divide by 3. That gave me the height of each step, and I needed the shadow of where those steps were coming up, because we need a base plate and then the top plate. So that was my base form. Now, what materials do you need to do this? This is like a whole other set of tools or whatever? No. A good pair, these are Scotch scissors. These are really sharp. This is a great pair of scissors. And they will cut right through the styrene, the sheet styrene. So that's my basic tool. X-Acto knives to make life easier. Diagonal cutters. And again, X-Acto knives for cutting the other forms of stock styrene. So which stock styrene did I use? Well, for my base plate, I used just this plain sheet. No feature on it. 0.03 inch or 0.75 millimeter thick. Cuts nice and easy with these scissors. For the platform itself, I used more evergreen product, just 6-inch or 4.2 millimeter tile in sheet. And then for the various trim and structural elements, a variety of different, again, evergreen materials. So I have here 3/16 inch L angle, which is a fairly large L angle. Then I have 1/8 inch, which is a much smaller L angle. And last but not least, we have some simple square stock, 2.5 by 2.5, and that is that stuff. So it's just a matter of cutting the materials and laying them out. So I'm going to get started with that, and we'll get one of these things. I'm going to do 2 at the same time, but I'll show you how I get one of them built. Okay? Oh, before I go, key part. When I was doing the first one, I kept track of the styrene, the evergreen styrene that I used. So I knew which, well, because I went through used up my supply of stock styrene, but then I knew, okay, this is what I need to reorder, because that worked great. And then I have my platform height, I have the height of my step risers, my paint process that I fiddled and figured out, and all the way through. I'm going to show you all that, but you just might want to consider, if you go and do something like this and you want to do repetitive structures, like I did several of these bases, so that they look consistent. Once you figure out how you want to do it, write it down so you have it as reference for yourself. Okay, so let's get moving. Okay, so here we go. Starting out, just laying out the die cut hex pieces on the plain sheet styrene for the base, and then it's just a simple matter of drawing around to mark the cut lines. And once that's done, we can get 2 out of 1 sheet. So I will draw out the second form. Now with the single hex, I will go in all the places where I can draw out a single hex form. I will do that as well, and you'll see why later. No material will go to waste, or as little as possible. So now with it all drawn out, get the good scissor and start hacking away here and get these pieces set out. And you can see that the plastic has some give. At some points, it's just a matter of giving the plastic a little wiggle and the pieces come loose. This doesn't have to be super exact. You'll see at the end a lot of little imperfections will be covered up in paint, and other people will never know they're there. You may know they're there. So we'll save those single hexes. Now, just going in with an X-Acto, and even though not super concerned about it being perfect, do want to make sure that we have some even edges. And now moving into the tile stock styrene. So for this, we only have to do the top megahex and the single hex for the step, as I just showed there. Otherwise, same treatment. I'm going to line it up and draw it out. This as well, we can get two on one sheet, and we will also need some of these single hex pieces like so to do our steps. And to mock it up real rough, there's the base, the top plate, the upper step, the lower step, and the entry. 1, 2, 3, and up it goes. So now we need to draw a reference line because we can start building up the base. So we'll draw this line here will be the outer reference of where the top plate will shadow. And now using the stock styrene and Tester's model cement, which works great on this evergreen stock styrene, just going to start cutting lengths. Doesn't have to be, rocket science as far as the measurement. It's just sighting it up and then gluing it down. Now the purpose of the stock styrene is to lay out basically a foundation curb that we will glue the sides of the platform to, so that we get a good bonding surface. Otherwise, we'd be gluing a butt joint of a sheet to a sheet, which is a very small bonding area that makes it very weak, and then it'll fall apart. And it's also hard to get things straight. By putting this down first, and there you see it all done, we have a nice gluing surface and also a right angle reference point. So now we'll do the sides, and using our 5 tile handy dandy measuring stick, we can mark off 2 rows from the sheet styrene and just cut along those lines. And that will give us 2 long strips, which we will now lay up against the curb and mark it. There's not even a need to cut this because staying along the grooves of the tile, the styrene it's almost like a perforation. The styrene just snaps free. And now laying down that bead of glue and then gluing to the curb that we made with the stock styrene. Now a little Mr. Cement S here will bond up that corner so that we stay true. And we're just going to work around. And, if it's a little off, like right here, I just go back, trim a little piece, stick it right back on there. The corners don't have to be perfect, and you'll see why in a moment. It's all, it's all in the details of the design. So, working around the perimeter, and that little extension there is to sit under that 1 hex that sticks out from the megahex cluster on the top. So that's what we have. Yes, there are gaps, and as I said, we are about to fix that. So to fix these corners, we have the large L-angle stock styrene, as you see here on the finished product, and we're going to mark off using our 5 tile handy dandy reference a couple of pieces of this. And because we know our sides are those 5 tiles high, it's a ready-made measurement from that reference piece. A little cleanup with the X-Acto. We'll pile some glue on there. You notice I'm not being, really careful with the glue. It's not necessary because, again, once this goes into paint, it'll all come together. Now, not only does this cover up any gaps in the corners, it also
reinforces the structure. But we do have these two angles that are not right angles, and as you saw, I just took the L angle, pinched it in the needle nose, and snapped it along its spine, and then I can just glue the two separate pieces right into that corner, adjust them into place. I'll put a little Mr. Cement on there to firm that up so that when it's painted there's no actual gap, and that is done. And then same for that other odd angle. Snap the styrene, put the two pieces in place, and there we go. Done. Now, there is one problem here, and that is the entire center of the upper platform has no support. So from scraps, I'm going to make two little 5 tile high pieces, glue them into a T, and then glue this T inside the base. So this will support the middle of the upper platform. Now to make that a little more secure, I use some of the smaller angle styrene and basically just cutting arbitrary lengths here to make some gussets to reinforce it, because that will bond a whole lot better than just edge to edge of the pieces. So that will make those very secure. And here, this top piece is building the first of what you will now see, which are the glue rails for the top plate. So this is using the small angle styrene, and I'm just going to glue those to the sides, and just checking to make sure that as I'm putting them in there, they are level with the top of the side piece. Otherwise, there's going to be a big gap between, either there'll be a big gap between the top plate and the side, or the top plate won't grab the glue rail. So they're all ready to go. We go with some glue on there, some cement, and we drop it on there, and there we go. We have a platform. Now, it's not perfect, no problem. This tester clear part cement that I'm using is basically like filler, and it will sit there in those open seams and seal them. And as I've said a couple of times now, once it goes into paint, it'll be all good. Now, back to the square stock. You notice I pointed out some of those supports. This is for two purposes. One, it's to support these overhanging ledges of the top platform. And two, in terms of, the gameplay when this is in use, it's to make it clear that, nobody should be moving their combatants in those spots. So it is for support, but also just to keep any arguments. Now it's time to cut the legs for the steps. I had figured out I need 14 millimeter pieces for the high step, 7 millimeters for the low step, and once they're cut, I just go in there, mark 6 spots with glue, take the tweezers, and stand them up. They don't need to be perfectly true and level. The step's going to sit on there. As long as it catches 3 or 4 of them, it's not going to go anywhere. Now a little swirl of glue, and that secures the entry plate. Now we have our 2 steps. You can see I've labeled them because I've made sure they've fit in the right way. Now I'm going to flip them over, and with the stock styrene, I'm going to make a little border underneath. One, this is so aesthetically, the step does not just look like a plain old sheet of plastic, gives it some depth. And 2, any imperfections with joining the legs will be hidden from view. Now I'm going in with the clear part cement and filling in any of those joints. Again, once paint goes on, it'll all be good. Now, something different. I had a little bit of extra styrene, so I drew out hex outlines. Okay, and now in the middle of that mega hex, I made another little bordered step piece, and I'm going to drop that in there. So now I have a platform with a just moderately raised center section, and I'm going to add some smaller square stock to really delineate these hex borders, and figure, this could be marking some type of central objective. Now you see I'm using this, probably been wondering why I have this X-Acto blade with a broken tip, and that's why, because it makes a great tool for removing excess cement. And there we go. It's ready. Okay, so now with the assembly done, base assembly, we have to add some ground effect. For that, I just use some randomly odd cut pieces of square stock, which gives me pieces that look like rubble, rocks, whatever you want to call them. So a little spread of glue, and I can drop those in there. And the areas of the structure that are supposed to be like ground and not, masonry type area will have a little definition to them. And these can just be sprinkled in. Just want to make sure they're not too close to the platform itself. Now here, going backwards a little bit, we have all these leftover hex pieces. So what to do with them? Well, they can go to use. So I figured out these can be little effect pieces for a scenario map. So with a little flat black and a little bit of this Rust-Oleum chrome, we can create a nice shiny surface and get something like this. So what did I do here? Well, besides the spraying, I found these little plastic jewels and these foam bumpers walking around Hobby Lobby looking for an idea, and there it was, or there they were. So now a little test to clear parts, and I can clear part cement, and they'll bind anything. So I can lay down these little stone pieces, and there we go. We have treasure objectives, or whatever you want to call them. I'll cut the foam bumpers in half because they're double-sided adhesive, so I get a non-adhesive surface exposed, which I can now write on with a gel pen to number these so that if you need a reference during a battle or a scenario, there you go. And after a little bit of time, they're all done. And we have, I just did a few different kinds. So we have some, 3 stone or 3 treasure pieces, 2 stone. I gave them a little numbering system so it's easy to keep track of them. And that's it. So a little something extra to dress up the playing area. Now here, after paint, this is Rust-Oleum gray primer with Tamiya gray surface primer misted on. And now using Tamiya flat white and this piece of foam, going to do a little sponge painting here to add some more color gradation to these tile surfaces. Now, on camera, it is difficult to see the lighter gray of the Tamiya surface primer, but it is there, and the white adds a little more definition to that. And you notice I'm just doing it randomly. Don't want to overthink this. The more chaotic it looks, the more natural it will appear. And likewise for the steps. So that is done. Now we can paint the dirt areas with this Tamiya Deck 10. So now we'll get a little color contrast against the masonry portion of the platform, like so. Next thing will be to go in with some semi-gloss black for the support structures, like the base of the steps around the side, and this will also hide, a lot of mistakes and imperfections that are there. Now painting the support columns for those steps and the corner joiners and support columns for the top pieces. And again, in conjunction with the Tamiya clear part cement that was put in there, gaps, imperfections, they are covered over. This semi-gloss black hides details, and there we go. Now the magic starts with panel liner, which I'm just going to brush on there. First the brown. This will add some gradation and definition to the ground dirt areas and these rocks or debris, whatever you want to think of them, and turn this from a simple color by number to a more living organic paint job. Now switching to black panel liner to do the masonry areas, and now you see this works to blend these different colors together. It accentuates the dividers between the tiles and gives us what looks like a more worn, beaten masonry look. And if it's ever too much, you just dab it with a cloth. Notice it tones down the white, but we still do get that highlight of that color. And that's all there is to it. Very simple technique. Now working with the sides of the platform to get those done. And then the biggest part will be doing the top surface of the platform. Now you see I'm just going in big circles here, and that is to prevent any streaking, because that will look unnatural, whereas these overlapping swirls will not only help work the paint in, but will give it a more natural look. And then if it's too much, see I have a dark spot there, just dab it with a cloth, and there we go. That adds even more color gradation. So now shot of Tamiya Flat Clear TS80 to protect the paint. Now I can finally, at long last, glue on the steps, so they are done. And there we go. Only thing left is to do the hex outlines. Now I use this, will be used for the Steve Jackson Games Melee combat system, so I need the hexes on there. If you don't, for whatever game system you're using, you can skip this step. But just outlining that die cut hex with the gel marker, and then going back to add some extra definition to those lines so that they are easily recognizable. And with one done, going back to the other platform I'm working on, and that's it. Okay, and here we go. Everything now built and set up on a map. So I am going to zoom in here, try to get a little closer. Please bear with me if it's a little shaky as I move the camera around, because I am holding it in my hand, obviously. But I just wanted to show you how this all looks once it's set up, and what you can do with some very simple techniques, things I like to stress in all these videos I do. You don't have to be some incredible hobby maestro with incredible fabrication skills, or you don't have to be some top-notch artist or anything. You can do a lot just with simple techniques and trying to get these things to blend together, and then you can take those skills and use them for whatever you want. Doesn't have to be building models. It could be for doing something like this. As long as it's all fun in the end, it's all good. So here I have set up the different platforms that I built. Who's that walking away? Set up the different platforms, and you can see them all spread out here. And there's that archery tower I talked about in the very beginning, and that central little area that I did with some leftover stock styrene with the tile on it. And I just went ahead and set up some of my old miniatures here. So if you're going to be real picky and take a real close look at these guys and say, hey, paint job could be a little better, well, I painted these 40 years ago, and yes, I could go back and redo them, but I like keeping them just the way they are because there is a lot of nostalgic value in the way they are. So there you have it. Here is stuff you can do to make your game day that much more fun. Yeah, we got some elves, we got some orcs, we got a Roman archer up on the tower, we got a troll, we got all sorts of guys running around here. And yeah, I just put these out having some fun and to do a display so you can get the idea. So that's that. Gonna call it quits for this one, and I will be back with another build. In the meantime, as always, enjoy your hobby, and
Roll high numbers for damage. Ha ha. All right. Goodbye.